This is the 2025 ASUS ROG Flow Z13, and probably one of the more exciting tablets or laptops that are coming out in the market in 2025. And that's because of the CPU that's inside of here. It's using the AMD Ryzen AI Max 390. I know it's an awful name, but this CPU has a very powerful APU. It's an integrated GPU that's just as powerful as a dedicated NVIDIA RTX 4060. Now, I can't benchmark this, okay? This is still a prototype, but I have ran a lot of games on this, which I will show you, along with a few other tests for performance that I can definitely talk about and give you my opinion. From the tablet itself, they've changed a few things. It's a little bit lighter, but it still has a 13.3-inch display. And instead of being 165 Hertz, it's now 180 Hertz. The color accuracy, the color gamut, all that kind of stuff is fantastic. It does have a 3-millisecond response time, so it's not as quick as an OLED panel. Obviously, it's touch. If you buy this tablet, it will come with an ASUS pen in the box. The keyboard is detachable, as it should be, but it won't work wirelessly. It's not a Bluetooth keyboard. It always has to be attached to the bottom of the device. The keys themselves actually feel quite comfortable. You can use them flat on the table like this, or if you have it up on your desk, you can put it in an angle if you want more of an ergonomic situation where it feels better for your wrists. I do have one complaint about this keyboard though. The RGB on it kind of sucks, like really sucks, okay? This was the same complaint I had with the previous version. Even all the way on Max, okay? It's really hard to see the RGB pop on this keyboard. The brightness underneath these keys are very, very low. The touchpad though feels great. It is glass, it's nice and clicky, and it's also really big for a tablet this size. Now there is a 5-megapixel infrared camera on the front, so obviously you can use Windows Hello facial recognition to log you in, but you also get an additional camera on the back. It has more megapixels, but it'll probably mostly be used to take pictures of documents in case you want to scan them and keep them for later. So this is what the 1080p webcam looks like. It's dark outside, so I'm not using natural light. This is just basically a normal light above my head. Yeah, you guys let me know how it looks, and how does the microphone sound? Is the audio quality good? It does have pretty good I/O for a tablet. So on the left-hand side, you do have two USB 4.0 ports. You have an HDMI 2.1 port. You have your power connector. This is the ASUS proprietary power connector, a micro SD card slot, and then on the other side you have a USB-A port, combo audio jack, you have a equalizer button, this will bring up your settings, volume rocker, and then of course your power button to turn the laptop on and off. Now I like the fact that they made the power button kind of flush with the tablet, but I do find it kind of hard to click, whereas these just feel a little bit clickier. It does have a metal back, and then of course you have your stand which pops out like this, and it allows you to put the tablet into different positions, almost all the way flat with this thing backwards. It feels very well made. Like this thing is so sturdy. It's just not going to move on your desk whatsoever. Underneath it, you do have your M2 slot. This is a 2230. You can obviously unscrew this. The other thing to take note is the design. This has a bigger window on the back. This obviously lights up with RGB. I think it looks kind of cool, but it does make the device look very, very gaming focused, whereas some people might be looking at this, want something a bit more muted. The other update is you get 4 speakers instead of 2, and I'll save my sound test for an actual retail unit. But enough about the device, okay? We gotta talk about performance, because that's what I was most excited about. In my mind, okay, when I think APU, unified memory, I think MacBooks, right? Because the one thing they do so well is full performance on battery. Unfortunately, you don't get full performance on battery with this guy. You're still carrying a big 200-watt charger. So if you want full performance on this, it has to be plugged into the wall. But it is better than a traditional gaming laptop with a dedicated GPU, because you do get more of that performance on battery. So for example, if I'm just using the CPU and GPU on performance mode on battery, you can't even enable turbo on battery mode, I'll lose about 20% performance, which is much better than, let's say, a laptop with an NVIDIA GPU where you would lose a lot more than that, because the GPU just requires so much more power. But there is a good thing here. If you don't want to take the charger with you, you can use a GAN charger. As long as it's 100 watts, you can plug it into this. Turbo mode will then be activated again. You won't get 100% performance, but you'll get 90% performance. So definitely much better than a traditional gaming laptop, but not as good as, let's say, a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pro. Now, I can't tell you the exact Cinebench results, but what I can say is that it's very comparable to an Intel 14900HX CPU, which is insane to think about in a laptop or tablet this size. AMD on stage compare this to the M4 Pro in terms of performance, and absolutely, yes, I feel like this is giving you M4 Pro performance. Definitely not going to beat out the M4 Max, but it's definitely an M4 Pro territory. If you're buying this to edit video, this is where things are a little different. Personally, I don't think this is a great video editing tablet, just because I found that like you could edit a 4K video on this without any issues, but you will have drop frames. It will be a little slow. I'd still prefer an NVIDIA GPU to edit a full 4K video, especially if you're using this as your main device. But the benefit to editing video on this is the battery life. I don't have exact battery results yet, but what I can say is because of the style of APU and CPU and unified memory together, I am getting much better battery life compared to the previous model. Now, if you're a developer and you plan on running large language models directly on the device, this is where things get super interesting. This APU doesn't have traditional VRAM like you'd find on a dedicated GPU. What it does is it shares system memory. So the more memory you have, the more memory this device can steal to be used as VRAM. So if you're downloading like a big 77 billion parameter large language model, it's not going to be able to do it with 32 gigabytes of memory. There's just not enough memory to support it. You need something with 128 gigabytes. Now, there's no 128 gigabyte or 64 gigabyte version of this tablet available. It's strictly 32 right now, but ASUS does say that they're planning to release bigger versions with more memory down the road. Now, you obviously can run smaller models on this. I downloaded a 3.2 billion parameter model and it ran it just fine. Was it blazing fast? No, but it was fast enough. Now, in terms of gaming, I can't give you the exact FPS, but what I will say is around 60 frames or well above 60 frames. And this will give you a general idea of how the games perform on this. So Cyberpunk, great benchmark for this type of stuff. You are gonna have to drop the settings to medium. You put on FSR, frame gen off, and I was getting well over 60 frames per second, completely playable, completely smooth. If you're playing something new, like Marvel Rivals, for example, not the best optimized game, especially when you compare it to Overwatch, but again, as long as you drop the settings a little bit, FSR can be on, frame gen off, well above 60 frames per second. It was definitely a very smooth experience. Path of Exile, which is an early access beta, so not completely optimized yet, and even though it's a Diablo style type of game, it does really tax your system, and with settings on Ultra, I was able to get around 60 frames per second. Now, Black Myth Wukong, which is a very demanding title, you're definitely going to have to enable frame gen for this game to run. And even for most NVIDIA cards, you kind of have to, right? Like the game is just so demanding. But, you know, with good settings on FSR, on medium settings, I was able to get well above 60 frames per second, making the game completely enjoyable to play on this device. I also tested a racing game, Dirt 5, which has always been predominantly optimized very well for AMD GPUs and CPUs, and it runs well above 60 frames per second. And this wouldn't be a laptop video if I didn't test out Overwatch. Obviously, it can run just fine on this computer. It runs fine on a regular integrated GPU, so no surprise there, but it runs beautifully on this tablet. So here's the bottom line. If you're a video editor, this is not going to beat out the MacBook Pro. I mean, the MacBook Pro just has better encoders and decoders inside of the system to really be taken advantage of when you're using DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere Pro. This does it okay, but it's not even on the same level. But if you don't care about that kind of stuff and you're buying this for like programming and you're buying this to game on and you just want something that's light but offers good battery life for a gaming laptop, I think that's where this excels. Now, personally, I would have loved to see this in a normal laptop. I know HP has a ZBook coming out with this, but I want to see it in more traditional laptops that are comparable to gaming laptops with dedicated GPUs. You're still going to get better performance with the upcoming 50 series from NVIDIA, but if you want something that's super light, that gives you really good performance off battery life or even with a GAN charger, I think they succeeded. And I can't wait to see more laptops with this chip inside of it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.